Good evening and welcome to the extraordinary executive meeting on 22nd of March. And present are myself, John Horsall, the leader of the council, John Kaiser, who's the deputy leader and executive member for finance and housing, Harry Bath, the executive member for environment and leisure, Graham Howe, the executive member for children's services, Charles Margetts, the executive member for health, wellbeing and adult services, Stuart Monroe, the executive member for business and economic development, and Gregor Murray, the executive member for resident services, communications and admissions, and Bill Sohn, the executive member for neighbourhoods and communities. Wayne Smith and Pauline Jorgensen have extended their apologies and are on Teams. Please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off. If you're participating via Teams, when you're not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphones. If you do not mute your microphone, it will be muted for you. To assist people viewing the meeting, could everybody participating via Teams turn off their cameras and only turn them on when speaking and introduce themselves whenever they speak. Please note that to avoid the chat function on Microsoft Teams being used inappropriately, it has been disabled. Please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. In attendance are Susan Parsonage, Chief Executive of Woking Borough Council, and Anne Hunter from Democratic Services. So, any declarations of interest? I don't think we have any financial statements tonight, so no. Okay, then just a few words from me. The cases of COVID are going up in Woking in line with our neighbouring boroughs across Berkshire and in line with national figures. Our current case rate is 831.9 per 100,000. That was for the week of the 9th to the 16th of March. These cases need to be interpreted with caution as they are dependent upon testing behaviour. The true case number and the rate of COVID is likely to be significantly higher. There is no doubt that there has been a sharp rise in cases that continues. This is likely to be fueled by a number of elements: the spread of the new subvariant of Omicron, BA2, which is more transmissible than the original Omicron strain, changes of behaviour as we move towards April. There is likely to be less testing, less isolation, less mask wearing, and consequently significantly more transmission. The waning of the pre-Christmas booster, still effective against serious illness, but waning in terms of contracting COVID, and the return of schools post-half-term. Primary school children remain unvaccinated. There has also been a rise in hospital admissions, with COVID locally accounting for both with and because of COVID admissions, but no increased admissions to critical care. The spring booster campaign is upon us, and I'm pleased to say that our local vaccine centre in Woking Central Library is open weekly on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and will be delivering vaccines to all those eligible. So please take advantage of that. We're also working with health colleagues to launch the 5 to 11-year-old vaccination programme in the first week of April, also accessible at the Woking Library Clinic. All residents who are eligible can walk up to the library and receive their vaccine at the time convenient to them. COVID has understandably taken a back seat in the national headlines of recent weeks, but we must remember that the virus is still circulating at high and growing numbers. We need to continue to work together to be understanding of those who live alongside us and to take actions to minimise transmission and protect vulnerable residents by staying at home if you are unwell, testing if you have symptoms, wearing masks in crowded spaces, and ventilating indoor spaces. In the truest sense, freedom cannot be bestowed, it must be achieved. Since Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, we in the West have taken freedom and peace for granted. This has directly led to the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, Georgia, Syria, Chechnya, and many, many more. The appeasement was the cause of the Crimean invasion in 2014 and the war in the Donbass. President Putin was sure that the West would do nothing. This inactivity has led to the invasion of the Ukraine. Again, Biden and Schultz assured them they would do nothing. This appeasement has also led to China manufacturing enslaved conditions for the West and the Russia providing the oil and gas. Our short-term prosperity has been dependent upon this slavery. This dependency is a form upon Russia, and China is modern slavery. We have willingly put the yoke around our necks for temporary, cheaper goods and energy, given away our technological advances and closed our capacity. Everything I've striven to do within Woking has been to encourage and create a framework for everyone to lead the life that they wish to lead without harming others. Events have now overtaken us, and we cannot ignore the failures of the past. The war in the Ukraine is now at our doorstep. The ramifications are immense and will affect everyone in the borough for the foreseeable future. We must and will welcome an indeterminate number of refugees. Currently, we foresee about 29 matched households and 26 refugees, 17 of which are children. I think that's like 46 refugees. Whilst the initial scheme foresees sponsorship, it also foresees immediate settled status. Therefore, if the initial arrangements are disturbed, the responsibility will fall on the local authority, which is us. This will inevitably put up pressure on our housing list, and we will need more social homes. We will also need to support people who are restarting their lives having suffered trauma. The Russian objective is to flatten the Ukraine. There is nothing to go back to, so we must plan that our refugees are likely to be indefinitely and possibly forever. We must be welcoming and do the best that we can to ensure that our residents are safe, secure and happy. We are fortunate in having fantastic staff with fantastic leadership, and we will do a great job. We have a Ukrainian community which we are reaching out to. We must ensure that we are doing all we can for them. We also have a Russian and Belarusian community within the borough who should not be penalized for Vladimir Putin. We do not have an argument with the Russian people, with the Russian government as its dictator and its acolytes. We need to make this clear in everything we do and say. We may well see certain commodities rise substantially in price, particularly energy, some foodstuffs and mined materials. This will hit certain sectors of our community particularly hard. In time, we may see shortages and rationing. We will need to increase our vigilance for those who find themselves in hardship. I've written to the Prime Minister expressing my support for his 6-point plan, which is to mobilise an international humanitarian coalition, to do more to help Ukraine defend itself, to maximise the economic pressure on Mr. Putin's regime, and no matter how long it takes, prevent any creeping normalisation of what Russia does in the Ukraine, and be open to diplomacy and de-escalation, and act now to strengthen the Euro-Atlantic security. Moving on to domestic abuse, given the seriousness of this subject, it is necessary to correct the misleading and potentially dangerous impression given by the front page article of last week's Woking Today. Contrary to the headline, the current domestic abuse service is not failing victims, nor is there any lack of refuge for those fleeing homes. In fact, this an inaccurate claim is particularly worrying, as it may deter victims from leaving abusive situations. We must be completely clear. Refuge is provided to any borough resident who is fleeing domestic abuse, without exception. We take that responsibility very, very seriously. In addition, our domestic abuse service is meeting all its statutory requirements. This is not a failing service. However, that does not mean that we are satisfied with the current level of service. Our aim is to go well beyond just meeting our legal requirements, which is why we increased the funding this year for this service by 55%. We have not yet seen the full benefits of that increased investment, and so intervened to improve the performance of our contractor, Cranston. We acknowledge that this has been necessary and would be perfectly reasonable for the newspaper to highlight areas where improvement is needed. But that is very different from the irresponsible suggestion the domestic abuse victims are being failed. To be clear, part of Cranston's contract is to open a new refuge to increase capacity in the borough, and they have failed to do this to date, which has left the borough relying on the existing refuge only. We are requiring Cranston either to open a new refuge within the borough or surrender that part of the contract and the funding accompanying it, so that we can find a different provider who can open up additional refuge. The new refuge will provide self-contained accommodation rather than shared facilities, and so will be usable by a wider range of victims. We are also requiring Cranston to have a 24-hour staffed phone line rather than the current phone line that has only voicemail out of hours. This will be up and running within a few weeks. Beyond that, we are closely monitoring Cranston's performance, as well as helping them improve so that we can get what we want, a first-class domestic abuse service for all those who need it. Thank you very much for your attention. So, public question time. There are no public questions. Member question time. Gary, are you there? Gary? Hello, Gary. Make yourself known. No, Gary? No, then will be a written answer. Graham, Woking Borough post-16 education options.
Thank you. The discussions that have gone on regarding sixth form provision, particularly in the south of Woking, have been prolonged and at times adversarial. What we have to deal with is the facts and move away from what at times has been emotive argument. It's true to say that when Bow Hunt was opened, it was envisaged that it would take a sixth form. However, at that time, it used its total admissions numbers to accommodate 11 to 16-year-olds only. There have been concerns about the impact now adding a sixth form to the Bow Hunt would have on other schools. I will deal with these questions and a number of other issues that are current and we have to face. It is a fact that currently there is no sixth form provision either through Bow Hunt or Oakbank, who are the two most southerly secondary schools in the borough. Records indicate that of Bow Hunt's fifth form leavers, all but 14 in the last year went to Farnborough College. That is, only 14 pupils went to other sixth forms within the borough. 16-year-olds, of course, are grown up enough to travel under their own means. But closer provision aids the green agenda as well as keeping those pupils within the local community. It also leaves us vulnerable in another way, in that if Farnborough College, which is where most of these students have gone, changed its admissions criteria at any time to only include Hampshire children, where would we be then? Most of the housing growth in recent years has been in the south of the borough. Our secondary schools have all got good, or on the road to good, Ofsted ratings, and it is natural that parents would want their children educated within the borough. And in many cases, it is exactly the reason why they moved here. In the last 2 years, we've experienced, and I'm going to use that word, unprecedented numbers of in-year applicants to come into our schools. That is, applications that are not year 1 or year 7, but those children coming in the intervening years. Of course, all of these pupils will also ascend to over 16 levels of education. In the discussions that we have been having and continue to have with the Bow Hunt Educational Trust, it is not entirely around the academic education provision to sixth formers. There is now agreement that Bow Hunt will provide an appropriate level of SEND provision from 11 to 18-year-olds, which they had not previously provided. Let me be explicit about what the impact of that change is. If a child has an educational health plan, then it is statutory that the school designated in that educational health plan is where the pupil has to go by law. The designated school has to have the resources to provision that SEND. Therefore, if pupils have a plan and they wish to stay at Bow Hunt, then the SEND provision needs to be in place where previously it had not. The children would not have to go to another school. That means, and it is reasonable to expect that Bow Hunt will have the same proportional numbers of SEND children. And by the way, the number of SEND children is going up. Those children with educational health plans at Bow Hunt will then be sharing the load in line with other schools. It then frees up spaces for those without plans in other schools in the borough. I know that's a bit convoluted, but that's the formula. Let me turn to other pressures on school places. With the expected incoming Ukrainian children, we will be under pressure for places in all year groups. We have a challenge in placing girls within the borough. The Bow Hunt Educational Trust has agreed to have a flexible package of additional places to include, from this September, 30 Year 7 places, and will make a provision for another 30 Year 7 places if needed. That's taking it up to 60 if the demand requires it. And they will also provide additional Year 8 and Year 9 places to meet this increasing and unknown demand. This recommendation will not only affect the south of Wokingham, but also help alleviate our placement challenges in Loddon, Early and Woodley. The proposed sixth form provision at Bow Hunt School is strongly supported by the local community, and indeed a petition was presented to council by our colleague Councillor Charles Magetz. The council's own consultation on 11 to 16 provision in 2021 recorded significant support for a sixth form in the south. Creating a new sixth form provision here will enable students to travel to their education by sustainable means. By that we mean walking or cycling rather than by car, coach or bus, and therefore contributes towards the green agenda, which I think I mentioned earlier. There has been consultation with the Borough Educational Partnership, which we've newly set up, and these are made up of other school heads across the borough and is the conduit now for getting an understanding of all schools' needs across the borough. The consultation, whilst the provision at Bow Hunt is not entirely satisfactory to some, I would like to thank all heads for being pragmatic and accepting the conditions for a sixth form being limited to protect the viability of the surrounding Wokingham schools via a 3-year protection clause. Overall, while the mainstay of this recommendation is provision of a sixth form, it also covers important and much needed provision of SEND for other school spaces and additional places across all year groups. The total cost of the provision is estimated at £5.7 million, of which the Bow Hunt Trust will make a contribution of £2 million, the 3.7 already being accounted for in the medium-term financial plan. I would like to thank the officers for their good work in preparing the report and its attachments, which they have done at some speed over the last months. And I would like to thank the Bow Hunt Educational Trust for their engagement and collaboration for the provisions to be made in the agreement. And I would also like to thank the other secondary heads throughout the borough's through the borough's educational partnership to enable rapid discussion and their pragmatism in taking this project forward. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Graham. I was just going to say, it will come as no surprise to you, completely support this. In 2005, when I first moved to Finch Hampstead, I remember clearly going to the local shop at California Crossroads, seeing several petitions all over the till, basically with people campaigning for a school in the south. At the time, there was nothing. The arguments then are much the same as the ones you've made tonight. You know, schools, long journeys to school, lack of independence, basically in travel, more sustainability, and better services for local residents. Now, this was partially dealt with when Bohunt opened, basically, and you covered the reasons that it happened then. I don't wish to go over them now. That's all history. 2 years ago, I was first contacted by a group of my residents, as was Councillor Sargent, my fellow ward member. They were very happy with the school. Their children were rising in age, and they were beginning to wonder, as all parents do, about what happens after. They were very happy with the education, and they were very concerned about the future. We decided to talk to them, listen to them, and advise them, and engage with them. Basically, the residents of Finch Hampstead, as you've mentioned, spoke clearly over this. 2 petitions in the last few years, over 1,000 signatures on each. I'm very pleased that the council's agreed a deal. I want to thank you, the leader, the deputy leader, and all the officers who've worked on this, because without your support, this wouldn't have happened. This is a good deal for WBC. It gives extra year 7 places, it gives extra SEND places, and it also gives this 6th form capacity. It's also a good deal for the Bohunt Educational Trust, but it's actually a great deal for local residents, because it finally completes this circle that basically was started in 2005 and means there's a complete package of education available to local residents. So residents in my ward, Finch Hampstead South and Arborfield will all benefit from this, which is fantastic. So I'd like to say thank you very much for everyone who's worked towards this. And as I said, it'll be no surprise, I'll be voting firmly in favour.
Thank you, John. Graham, firstly, I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate you, the officers and the Bohunt Trust, and everybody that's been involved in this. I think it's, as Charles has already said, a fantastic step forward for our community, a great investment in the future of our community and in the future of our kids as well. So please pass my thanks and my congratulations on. You spoke a little bit about SEND provision at Bohunt specifically, and I'm really interested in that because, you know, we do have a rising number of SEND children in our borough, kids with EHCPs, as you've mentioned. If Bohunt is going to be adding SEND provision, is there going to be an impact on the schools that already do provide SEND provision across the borough?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I'm pleased to clarify and make it clear as to what happens. If a child is issued with a plan, they have to designate a school to which they would be educated. And if the school that they're given the plan, the school that they're in organises the plan and is not able to give that provision, then the child has to go somewhere else. And from the outset, and I know not why, but there's no point in going into it, Bohunt did not have this SEND provision in place 5-6 years ago, but now they will have it in place. SEND covers a lot of different things, and the discussions are going into the detail of that now. And what I would like to say is that there's been a lot of disinformation is a word that's used these days, but there certainly had been a certain amount of mistrust between residents, the council, and the Bohunt Trust. And I think that we've cleared that up now. We've got a single line of direction. We know what the conditions are that we want to have together, and we both want to give the best for those local children.
Thank you very much, Graham. I mean, as you know, Bohunt is in my ward. I started the journey in 2005 with Charles' predecessor. And I would say that the school has delivered everything we expected it to. And I think that the 6th form, if I can use the expression, is the final brick in the wall. When we built the school, we built it as a E, but only built up the F because we knew at some stage we would have to extend it. And I think this is really good for the residents of the borough and very good for the school. And in time will be very good, I'm sure, for the council. Thank you.
If I could take it to the vote, which is the recommendation on page 5. I shan't read it out because it's too long. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. And Bill?
I'm pleased to say we're planning to introduce a consultation into bringing into being a public sector protection order. And this is mainly in response to the concerns of our residents whose lives have been blighted by the car meets in our car parks and public spaces and irresponsible driving in our borough. We do at the moment take action against these perpetrators in conjunction with Thames Valley Police. This consultation will take place after the elections in May, and if positive result is obtained, will be introduced shortly after. Public sector protection orders give us more strength to our service. Fixed penalty. There we are, can't see a thing. Fixed penalty notices can be issued on the spot, resulting in a £100 fine, and these can be issued by our officers or the police, resulting in legal action being taken if it's repeated. And with court, a possible fine of up to not exceeding £1,000 and/or confiscation of the vehicle. So it gives us a lot more teeth in which to be able to deal with these perpetrators and to solve a problem that's been a considerable concern of our residents. And I think once we can get the consultation up and running and we can get the results back in, we will solve what has been a very difficult situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think this is very important. I think that it means we change the way we approach things, and I think that the penalties. The only question I would ask, and it's a question that's been asked of me, is will the officers have adequate training? As we know, police officers get quite a lot of training and issuing fines to people who are breaking the law.
Yeah, thank you. The officers that will be carrying out these duties are new to us in the borough, but can I say that most of them have come with experience in these matters from other areas. They will be trained, obviously. I'm hoping also to be able to say that they will have body cams, which will give them protection and give the perpetrators protection as well, so that things are recorded and therefore accurate accounts can be given. I don't think there's any concern over the fact that our officers will be able to issue the fines. I think it's something that needs to be done because it will have more impact if we can issue fines on the spot.
So what would be the right of appeal on this?
Well, again, like any fines that are imposed, there is a right to appeal, and this would be dealt with in a magistrate's court. And obviously, if it goes to a magistrate's court, if they are found to be in breach of the law, then the fines can exceed the £100. So I would think that any right-minded person who realises that they have actually broken the law would settle for the £100. But in the cases where they do feel that there has been an injustice, they can appeal through the magistrate's court.
So what's the next steps? We're presumably going to defer this till we have an outline consultation, are we?
Yeah, the situation is that we can't do the consultation during Purdah, which is the period of sort of shutdown during elections. And so straight after what we're doing, we're getting the consultation ready so that as soon as the elections are over, we can carry out the consultation. And then very shortly after that, based on the results of that consultation, and if they're positive, as I say, we will then be able to introduce.
Okay. Any other questions? Those in favour? I think it's a really positive step, Bill. Well done. Thank you. Carried unanimously. And that concludes the business. Let's just to be sure that we knew what we were voting on. So we're looking at the recommendation on page 31. The executive agrees to authorise the Director of Place Growth to commence a public consultation about the proposed public spaces protection order, consider the results of the consultation and bring forward to the executive a further report if it is considered appropriate in the light of the consultation to proceed with the implementation of the public spaces protection order. So those in favour again? Unanimous. Thank you. And that concludes the business of the evening. Thank you very much.